We've got a fascinating topic for today's deep dive, something that's becoming more and more relevant, artificial intelligence in accounting. So get ready to really dive into how AI is, well, it's really changing the game for accountants.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting here? It's not just about AI, like taking over tasks, automating things. It's really about how it's changing the very core of how decisions are made in accounting.
And this isn't some, far off thing. This is happening now. And it makes you wonder, right? Like, how does an AI even make a decision in the first place?
Well, imagine for a second an AI system, and it's designed for something like credit scoring. So you've got this system, and it's being fed massive, massive amounts of data. Think financial histories, market trends, all of that. And just like our brains, right? We're wired to look for patterns. Well, AI does the same thing, but on a way bigger scale.
So it's like AI can see connections and all that data that we might miss as humans.
Exactly. The AI, it sifts through all that information, and it uses these things called algorithms, basically, sets of rules, if you will, to help it find those meaningful relationships within the data.
Okay, this is starting to sound really complex. Can you give us an example? Like, how is AI and in these algorithms being used in accounting right now?
Absolutely. Let's take fraud detection, for example.
Mm.
AI can analyze these massive data sets of transactions and pinpoint patterns that could point to fraudulent activity. This would be, well, practically impossible for a human to do, at least not at the same speed and scale.
That's incredible. But, it also makes you think about the potential downsides. Are there any risks involved with relying so much on AI for these critical decisions?
Oh, absolutely. That's a key question to be asking.
Hmm.
One challenge we see is something called the black box problem. It's basically the issue of being able to understand how an AI came to a particular decision. These algorithms, they can be so complex that it's not always easy to trace back the AI's reasoning.
And that lack of transparency, I imagine that could be a real problem, especially in a field like accounting, where accountability is so important.
Exactly. One way to approach this is to try to develop what we call more transparent algorithms. Ones where the decision-making process is clearer, easier to understand. Another approach is to put really clear frameworks in place for the responsibility and auditability of AI systems.
So it sounds like as AI becomes more a part of the accounting world, there's a lot to consider. It's not just about the technology itself, but also about adapting, our practices and our ethical considerations.
You hit the nail on the head. In a way, it's similar to how we approach human decision making.
Hmm.
In our own lives, we use this blend of intuition, values, past experiences, and of course, our understanding of rules and regulations that shape our choices. And businesses, they do the same thing, just on a much larger scale, right? They rely on those established policies and procedures, and especially in accounting, where accuracy and accountability are so important.
That's a great point. It's easy to forget that AI doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It's built by humans, trained on human data.
Yeah.
So maybe before we can fully grasp, the implications of AI making decisions, we need to get a better handle on our own decision-making processes.
That's a really interesting thought, and it's an important part of this conversation. Maybe we should delve into that a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Let's take, for example, something like personal finance. Think about a time, when you made like a big financial decision, maybe investing in something, or even, heck, even just buying a really expensive coffee.
Mm.
There's actually a lot that goes into that decision.
Oh, totally.
Uh,
You like to think, oh, we're being all rational, looking at the numbers, but there's this whole other layer of like gut feeling, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
how much risk can I actually handle?
exactly. Our intuition plays a huge part. But then there are our values too. Do you put more value on security? Or is it more about long-term growth for you? These values, they impact the choices we make, even if we don't always realize it.
And our experiences too, right? Both the good and the not so good ones. They can really influence our decisions, sometimes without us even knowing it.
Yeah, that's inevitable. Those past experiences, they become this lens through which we evaluate future choices. And it's not just us as individuals either. Businesses, they have experiences too, in a sense.
You mean like a company's history kind of influencing the decisions they make today?
That's it. But in a business, especially a larger one, it's not just about one person's gut feeling calling the shots. Businesses, they rely on these established rules and regulations. Think about accounting and auditing policies, all of that. They're there to ensure some level of consistency.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense, particularly in accounting. It's like you need those checks and balances to make sure decisions aren't just like made on a whim.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And within those systems, you have all these processes for guaranteeing things, right?
Yeah.
Making sure things are auditable, making sure the decision-making process is crystal clear. It's all about building a framework that's reliable.
It's like having a roadmap instead of just, winging it, which is probably a good thing when you're talking about finances. But I'm getting the sense that this is where AI might be starting to shake things up a bit.
You got it. Because now imagine you introduce a system that can analyze these mountains of data, spot patterns that humans might miss, and on top of that, it can make recommendations. That's the exciting potential of AI in accounting. But it also brings up some new challenges.
So we've talked about human decision making with all its, complexities and how businesses create these systems to kind of guide those decisions. But how do we make sure that AI, with its ability to analyze data at a scale we can barely comprehend, is actually being used responsibly within these frameworks?
Now, there's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Hmm.
One of the biggest hurdles, I think, is ensuring that AI doesn't end up compromising the transparency and accountability that are so vital in accounting.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we actually tackle that challenge? How do we take those values of transparency and accountability and bring them into this world of AI decision making, especially when that decision making part can feel, well, a bit like a black box?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? How do we bring that transparency and accountability into AI decision-making, especially when it feels like you said, a bit of a black box?
Right? It's a tough one. One thing we can focus on is developing what we call explainable AI. Basically, systems where we can actually see how the decision was made. Like, imagine being able to audit an AI's decision the same way you audit a financial record.
So instead of just getting an answer from the AI, we can actually see the steps it took, the logic it used. That makes a lot of sense, especially in accounting where every single number, it tells a story.
Exactly. If a client is flagged for a potential audit because of an AI's analysis, we need to be able to say, okay, this is why. And that transparency, it not only builds trust, but it also helps us make sure that, there aren't any biases hidden in the AI's algorithms. Which brings up another important point, the data itself. How do we guarantee that these AI systems are being trained on data that's actually representative, unbiased? Like we were talking about earlier, AI is only as smart as the information it learns from, right?
Absolutely. If we feed an AI biased data, well, it's going to be biased in how it analyzes things. It's that simple. That's why it's so important to use really diverse data sets that reflect, the real world in all its complexity.
So it's not just about having a ton of data, it's about having the right data that paints a complete picture.
Exactly. And this isn't a one-time thing either. As the world changes, as regulations change, we've got to make sure the AI systems we're using are keeping up. That means constantly checking the data it's using, refining the algorithms, and just making sure it's all lining up with those ethical standards of the accounting world.
So really, bringing AI into accounting, it's not just about flipping a switch and, plugging in some new tech. It's about changing how we think, how we do things, and really how we understand what it means to make good, responsible decisions in this new landscape.
I think that's a great way to put it. It really is an interesting time to be in accounting. AI has this incredible potential. It could completely revolutionize how we work. But it means we have to be really careful, really thoughtful about how we use it. Those core ethical principles, those have always been at the heart of accounting, and we can't lose sight of that.
It's a learning curve, that's for sure. And as we've seen in our deep dive today, it's a curve we've got to navigate carefully. Always keeping in mind that human element, how we design these AI systems, but also how we make sure they're used responsibly. And ultimately, how we use this technology to create a better future for accounting, one that's more efficient, more transparent, and more accountable.